Welcome back to Lily's Macabre Adventure, my new creepy channel. I have a really nice story tonight, and these will come more frequently as we near Halloween, of course. If you have any suggestions, leave them in the comments, as I am always looking for really good short stories to read for this channel, since it's a new endeavor. And of course, since it's a new channel, if you're just finding it, please subscribe, help me grow my channel. I have another channel called Lily's Viking Adventure, where I do history ASMR reading and some religious material, Norse pagan, a lot of Norse pagan stuff, sagas and things like that, and read old documents and manuscripts, and I also read stories. So if you would like to see some more, if you like this one, try that one out. I have, I think, almost 150 videos on that one, so it's a lot to choose from. Please shoot me a like, give the like button a great big hug, and I will get started. Today I am reading a story called Singing with All My Skin and Bone by Sunny Moraine. I'm telling you this so that you know. I don't remember when I started eating myself. You should remember something like that. It should be a moment, one of those that you carry around forever. A line that you cut across your life to mark before, when everything was one way, and after, when everything was different. I don't remember discovering it like a secret formula or an equation that explained the universe. I don't remember discovering it at all. I'm not sure it was a discovery. I think maybe it was something that grew, that asserted itself, learning without meaning to learn, like walking or speech. You're made of things you can take to pieces, and those pieces can be eaten. The truth is, you're made of meat. I do remember what I did with it. When I realized there was something to be done, I remember that very well. There's a world with someone in it, and a world without them. If it happens right in front of you, that's sort of hard to miss. I carry these things around with me. I've been trying to say them for years, so if you don't mind, there are all kinds of things you don't hear. What you need to understand is that this kind of magic persists because it works. It doesn't work in large ways, in obvious ways. It's not showy and it's not out to impress anyone. This kind of magic is like a path through the night or tunnels beneath an occupied city, supply lines for resistance and the movement of agents. This kind of magic is the slender, fragile reclamation of power. And when it's done right, no one notices it's there. I've gotten very good at hiding it. But I was very clumsy then, and even if it worked, people saw too much of it, and that blunted its power. It takes years of practice to know just how to destroy yourself, just how much to pick away, just how much to gnaw off, just how much to cut. What you need to understand is that I can't change anything. I couldn't protect myself then, and I can't now. What you need to understand is that this has never been about anything but the sheer pleasure of survival. Here's what might have been the moment. It could have been anyway, any time, somewhere between the number 5 and the number 9. It could have happened like this. There's a healing scratch, The unevenness of it is pleasant, and the realization that fingernails slide so very neatly under its surface. It takes almost nothing to pull it away, and the blood wells up like liquid garnets, and it's so pretty. And there's something that washes over you, and then like slipping into a warm bath, and your breath comes easier when you sag against everything. And it comes to you that there's power in this, because just as you slip down, you slip sideways, and you see things you didn't see before. There are bones under the world, and now they're in front of you, and they rattle and dance. Grasses are deep jungles, streams are mighty rivers. Here is the broken ground by a creek, and it's a massive gorge through which that river flows. Everything small is abruptly enormous and dramatic, and you can lose yourself in it. The sky flips sideways. Gods lurk in the branches, in concrete, and in all the machines and polished stones whisper stories from when their melted hearts cool, and they tell you everything they learned from their shaping rivers. You see everything that might be. You see the filthy, churning story factories. You see the eyes in the storm drains. Fuck your city beneath the city bullshit, your vampire private detectives, and your werewolves tending bar, because I've seen it. You dig, and suddenly there's a hole in you through which your spirit pours. You eat of your own flesh and drink of your own blood, and it's the deepest kind of communion. And if they see you, they wait after school until you're 10 minutes from home and they pelt you with stones. What you found can't protect you, but it seems like it just might be worth it. So there was that day when he followed me home from school, backed me into a corner of the afternoon, using his chest like a battering ram. Pulled back and ready to break through. Put yourself there. See, it's amazing how everyone just disappears at moments like that. Crowded neighborhood full of kids headed toward home, but then the part of space you occupy is sealed off, and it's just you and him. And you're bargaining, begging, dragging down the sleeve of your shirt, remembering that he came after you on the playground and feigned a kick to make you flinch, that he laughed and leered in your face, that you looked up at him and thought about the scabs on you like dinosaur scales. You thought about peeling it all away and revealing claws and pebbled lizard skin. And you thought about tearing his belly open with your toes and spilling his guts. Ah, yes. You thought about peeling it all away and revealing claws. And you thought about tearing his belly open with your toes and spilling his guts on the blacktop and screaming at the overcast sky while everyone else took their turn to run and the useless lunch monitors vomited against the gym wall. Just a note. That was a spell that never worked. I did try. Don't think for a second that I didn't try. Even magic spun from torn flesh has its limits. You make bargains in moments like that. I think we've all been there. For weeks, trying a variety of ways home, creeping along like a deer heading for water, ears and tail pricked. Never the same way 2 days in a row. But he found me, and I didn't understand exactly why it was so terrifying, being alone and small in that blocked off space with him. But I offered him secrets. Never mind what they were. Secrets are powerful. That's one thing I'm sure as hell not telling you. He wasn't the only one, the first or the last. And when I talk about him, I'm talking about them all. Some of whom I remember, and many of whom I've forgotten. But I've never forgotten what he said. That's not enough. Let's leave him for a moment. Let's take some inventory. Match heads work well. Just blow them out, press them against the inside of your arm. It's exquisite. Though you don't get the satisfaction of feeding on the burns until after they've scabbed over. There's a pulse in the world, and you can watch it spread outward from those red glowing spots, encasing you in a translucent shell. It never lasts, but it's better than nothing. Unfolded paper clips work wonderfully, more slowly. The face of a wound parts like a smile and drools blood and clear plasma. And in that world, only you can see it, steams like incense offered to a god. Gods respond to that kind of offering, and they gather silks and beautifully dyed wool around your heart. Clippers for nails, cuticles. These are delicate tools. A little too delicate, and also a little too easy, because no magic ever comes without effort. They can make openings, beginnings, but then other things have to take over. No needles or knives. They are too sharp, too clean. The best tools for this kind of work have edges that are ever so slightly blunted, that require commitment to use. Of course, fingernails are the best. They're always the best, ever present and reliable. The claws I was born with, even if they aren't the claws I wanted. I'm telling you this so you know. But I'm not expecting you to be able to use this information. I can reach through this membrane and touch you, but I don't think you can really touch me. These are only scars to you, and all you ever saw was a strange little child who walked like a ghost through the world, looking for something without having the slightest idea what it was. More and less real, both at once, by virtue of spilled blood. Ghosts don't bleed. I do. They used to burn witches, didn't they? There's something about skin, something supernatural. Not to say that it's magical or ghostly, though it is both of those things, or that it contains a power in and of itself, and that power magnifies when removed from a body, though it does. Skin is supernatural in that it connects, like a thin tendon, to every part, but also above the natural. Skin is cells, hair, sweat, the potential of blood. Skin is sensation, an experience of what is. Skin is lightning, spark network of a sensory organ, explicable and yet not at all. Remove skin and see what's beneath. See how it all fits together. Understand the structure of something when that structure breaks down, and follow its slashing power lines to their source. I spun my first magic from the stuff of what I was, torn away because I could spare it. But I began because, like all of us, I had something I was trying to get away from. And then I found other reasons. Let me tell you what I wish I could have said when they saw the blood and the pits in my flesh and tried to get me to stop. Because everyone knows little kids shouldn't do this shit to themselves. Let me tell you that when you discover a direct line into the fabric of the universe, it's very difficult to just leave that alone. Let me tell you what it's like to wear every mark like a secret ornament that only you find lovely, and to hate them at the same time because of what they'll mean to everyone else. So you hide them as best you can with long sleeves and shadows, but they always see in the end. Let me tell you what it's like to make blood magic, real magic, because packed under your fingernails, the world loses its power to hurt you anymore. Let me tell you what it's like to run pain through a complex refinement process that makes it chocolate and warm sheets and dappled summer sunlight. Let me tell you what it's like to select your instruments of sorcery according to their sharpness and keen edges. Let me tell you what it's like to be a witch in junior high school. Let me tell you. Shut up and let me talk. I wish I could get this into words. None of them are coming out quite right. I want to tell you what it's like to have magic in your skin. Sit down beside me and let me illuminate all my scars. And let me tell you all my many early names. No, they weren't bestowed like honorable titles, and they hurt worse than the actual words, but they dug into me just like everything else. And I have them still. Not all scars are the kinds you can see. Not all scars are beautiful. A changing body is a dangerous thing. A body that can be changed is more dangerous still. All these little bodies, all this potential. And imagine if they all found out how to take hold of it all at once. Every single beaten down body rising in angry flames. God, we would have been terrifying. Can you imagine? Can you just imagine that? There's a reason why we send children off to war. Here's one for the spell books. The potential of blood is sometimes more powerful than its presence. It's a fine line drawn between intention and desire. But it's there if you know how to look, if you know how to walk along it, careful not to trip one way or the other. That moment before the caterpillars rupture, before the pale flush of the fighter cells and the stacking of the platelets. And then there is a cycle of rebuilding, destruction, and rebuilding again. Bodies are very persistent. They don't take no for an answer. If you can grab hold of that, it's like getting a tiger by the tail and teaching it to bring you the hearts of tender lambs. That's not enough. Okay, motherfucker. I'm enough. You know what? I'm enough. I'm the baddest bitch around. There's razor wire in my blood. can clap my hands and summon an army of ravenous corpses from the cracks in the pavement. I can throw my tennis shoes over the telephone wires and turn them into a murder of hungry crows. I can spread my hands and break the world open. Release 100,000 eyed seraphs to see your soul to ruins. I have a wolf's bite. I have a pack at my heels. My mothers were harpies and furies. My sisters were the Morrigan. My daughter will be fucking Kali. My grandmothers burned, but saw me to birth in centuries of ash. And it doesn't matter what, I always run away. And it doesn't matter that I'm trying to drive a devil's bargain with a grunting, sweating fifth grader. And it doesn't matter that you made me cry all those times before. Because you think I'm not enough? You piece of shit. I can roll up my sleeves and tear off my skin and make you fucking cease to exist. That could have happened. It could have. I'm telling you this so you know. What I won't tell you is whether or not they ever found him. I won't tell you if it happened all at once or little by little, slowly enough for him to scream as he lost his limbs, his heart, his tongue. I won't tell you whether I cried at what was happening or just watched, impassive, or whether I laughed and clapped my hands. I certainly won't tell you whether or not I ran away. I certainly won't tell you if I bargained in the end. I won't tell you if it all failed, if I can only look back and rage, if I'm just lying to myself even now, and all I have left is stories, and those lies, and where my feet could take me. We're always making bargains. It's the thing. We forget them, but they happen. Secrets for life, flesh for power, blood for knowing. No one had to teach me these things. I learned them from being in the world. But even if you don't ask for something like that, it has a price. I don't curse crops. I don't cause children to be born sickly or deformed. I don't bring plagues of rats. I've never stolen the breath of a baby while it slept. I can't travel in chill night winds. I can't give you a potion to catch the heart of your true love. I can't read the stars, and I have no idea what's going to happen next. There are all kinds of things I can't do. I count my marks and take stock of my little magic, my flesh and blood magic. And I think I only have so much of both to give. And I've given a lot to get this far, but I'm still here. And I'm telling you this so you know. Welcome to Lily's Macabre Adventure. If this is your first time, and this is a new channel, so it may well be your first time, make sure to viciously attack the like button for me and subscribe. Today I have some very interesting stuff for you. We're going to talk about the Wendigo for a little bit, some history, the folklore, information we have on the Wendigo, and then I'm going to tell you a story from, I believe, the middle 1800s about a Wendigo encounter. So we're going to get started here in just a second. If you don't know about my other channel, it's called Lily's Viking Adventure. And in that one, I ASMR style read stories, history. I'm currently working on a 13th century manuscript, Frisian manuscript, and I am reading the John Carter series, which is by Edgar Rice Burroughs, starting with The Princess of Mars. And that's, if you like sci-fi at all, it's over 100 years old, and it is an incredible sci-fi story, way ahead of its time. So check that out, Lily's Viking Adventure. And remember to viciously attack the like button and sub to me. So we'll get started. The Wendigo is a mythical creature or monster from the folklore of certain indigenous peoples of North America, particularly among the Algonquin-speaking tribes. It is often described as a malevolent and supernatural being associated with cannibalism, winter, and greed. The Wendigo is typically portrayed as a gaunt and emaciated figure with pale skin, sunken eyes, and antler-like horns on its head. In legend, the Wendigo is said to be born from the actions of humans who resort to cannibalism in extreme conditions, such as during harsh winters when food is scarce. It is believed that consuming human flesh can transform a person into a Wendigo, causing them to become insatiable for more flesh and to develop supernatural powers. The Wendigo is often associated with cold and hunger, and it is seen as a symbol of the dangers of greed and the consequences of violating taboos. Wendigo stories have been passed down through generations among indigenous communities, and the creature has also been subject of fascination and inspiration in popular culture, including literature, films, and other forms of media. The Wendigo has become a symbol of the primal fear of starvation and the dark side of human nature. Origin. The legend of the Wendigo has its origins in the folklore of various indigenous peoples in North America, particularly among the Algonquin-speaking tribes such as the Ojibwe, Cree, and Algonquin. The concept of the Wendigo has been part of their oral traditions for centuries. The specific origins and characteristics of the Wendigo can vary among different indigenous communities, but the common theme is the association with cannibalism and the fear of hunger during harsh winters. The Wendigo legend likely emerged as a cautionary tale to discourage cannibalism within these societies, as it was seen as a heinous act and a violation of cultural taboos. While the exact origins of the Wendigo legend are difficult to trace due to its oral nature, it has been part of Native American storytelling for generations. Over time, as European settlers and colonizers interacted with indigenous peoples, elements of the Wendigo legend were incorporated into the broader cultural folklore of North America. In the modern era, the Wendigo has also become a popular subject in literature, horror, and popular culture, further solidifying its place in folklore and myth. Physical description. The physical description of the Wendigo can vary somewhat depending on the specific cultural and regional variations in the legend. There are several common traits often associated with this mythical creature. Emaciated appearance. The Wendigo is typically described as extremely emaciated and skeletal, with its skin stretched tautly over its bones. This emaciation is a symbol of its insatiable hunger. Tall and gaunt. Wendigos are often portrayed as towering figures, much taller than an average human. Their height adds to their menacing and supernatural aura. Pale skin. They are usually depicted with sickly, almost white or ashen skin, which contrasts with their dark, sunken eyes. Sunken eyes. The eyes of a Wendigo are often described as sunken deep into their sockets, giving them a sinister and hollow appearance. Distorted face. Some legends describe the Wendigo as having a distorted or elongated face, with sharp, jagged teeth, and a constantly ravenous expression. Antler-like horns. In some versions of the Wendigo myth, the creature is said to have antler-like growths on its head. These protrusions can vary in size and shape. Long, clawed limbs. Wendigos are often depicted with long, bony fingers extending in sharp, claw-like nails they use to capture their prey. Tattered clothing. Some depictions show the Wendigo wearing tattered, ragged clothing, which may be remnants of its former human identity. Personality. The personality of the Wendigo in folklore and popular culture is typically characterized by a few key traits. Malevolence. The Wendigo is generally portrayed as a malevolent and evil being. It is driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh and is often associated with cannibalism. This monstrous appetite for human flesh is one of the defining features of its personality. Greed and cannibalism. Wendigos are often seen as symbols of greed and the consequences of selfish actions. They are believed to be humans who have resorted to cannibalism in extreme conditions, and this act is seen as a manifestation of their greed and lack of compassion. No mercy. Wendigos are often depicted as relentless and merciless predators. They are said to hunt humans and have a voracious appetite, showing no remorse or empathy for their victims. Loneliness. In some interpretations, Wendigos are portrayed as lonely and tormented beings, forever cursed by their transformation into monsters. This loneliness may add a tragic dimension to their personality. Supernatural powers. Depending on the version of the legend, Wendigos may possess supernatural abilities, such as the ability to mimic human voices or control the weather. These powers add to their otherworldly and terrifying nature. Madness. The transformation into a Wendigo is often associated with madness and a loss of humanity. This madness can further contribute to their unpredictable and dangerous behavior. Special abilities. In various interpretations of the Wendigo legend, this mythical creature is often associated with supernatural abilities and powers. These abilities can vary depending on the specific folklore or story, but some common supernatural attributes and powers attributed to the Wendigo include invisibility. In some versions of the legend, Wendigos are said to have the ability to become invisible or to blend seamlessly into their surroundings, making them formidable and elusive predators. Mimicry. Wendigos are sometimes believed to possess the power of mimicry, allowing them to imitate the voices of humans or other creatures. This ability can be used to lure potential victims into their grasp. Control over winter. Given their association with cold and harsh winters, Wendigos are sometimes thought to have control over the weather and the ability to bring about blizzards or cold snaps. This power adds to their role as agents of winter's cruelty. Shape-shifting. In certain versions of the myth, Wendigos are capable of shape-shifting, allowing them to take on different forms and appearances to deceive or terrify their prey. Supernatural strength. Wendigos are often depicted as possessing immense physical strength, making them formidable opponents in physical confrontations. Immortality. Some interpretations suggest that Wendigos are immortal or nearly impossible to kill, making them enduring and unrelenting threats. Hypnotic gaze. Wendigos may be able to use their gaze to hypnotize or paralyze their victims, rendering them helpless. In modern usage and symbolism, the Wendigo continues to be a powerful and multifaceted symbol with various interpretations and applications. Horror genre. The Wendigo has become a popular figure in the horror genre, appearing in literature, films, video games, and other forms of entertainment. It is often used to evoke fear, dread, and supernatural terror. Symbol of greed and cannibalism. The Wendigo is seen as a symbol of the darker aspects of human nature, such as greed, cannibalism, and the consequences of selfish actions. It is often used to explore themes of moral decay and the corrupting influence of desire. Metaphor for environmental destruction. Some contemporary interpretations of the Wendigo draw parallels between its insatiable hunger and the destructive tendencies of human beings toward the environment. It is used as a symbol of overconsumption and the ecological consequences of unchecked greed. Psychological symbolism. The Wendigo has been interpreted as a metaphor for various psychological and emotional struggles, such as addiction, obsession, the feeling of being consumed by one's own desires. Commentary on isolation. In some modern adaptations, the Wendigo is used to explore themes of isolation and loneliness, reflecting the idea that those who become Wendigos are cut off from humanity and forever tormented by their transformation. The Wendigo is a versatile and enduring symbol that can be applied in various contexts to explore a range of themes, from the supernatural and horrific to the moral and ecological. Its significance and interpretation may vary depending on the medium and the cultural sensitivity with which it is handled. Related and similar creatures. There are several related and similar creatures in various cultures and mythologies around the world, some of which share thematic similarities with the Wendigo or have comparable attributes. Skinwalker, Navajo mythology. In Navajo mythology, a skinwalker is a malevolent witch who has the ability to transform into different animals. Like the Wendigo, the skinwalker is associated with dark magic and harmful intent. Ghoul, Middle Eastern folklore. Ghouls are creatures from Arabian folklore known for their association with the consumption of human flesh. They share some thematic similarities with the Wendigo, especially in their cannibalistic tendencies. Rakshasa, Hindu mythology. Rakshasas are supernatural beings in Hindu mythology known for their malevolence and shape-shifting abilities. They often prey on humans and are considered as powerful and evil entities. Baba Yaga. Slavic folklore. Baba Yaga is a witch-like figure in Slavic folklore who lives in a hut that stands on chicken legs. She is often portrayed as a fearsome and unpredictable character with cannibalistic tendencies. Kumiho, Korean mythology. The Kumiho, also known as the nine-tailed fox, is a shape-shifting creature that can appear as a beautiful woman. They are known for their deceptive and often malicious intentions. Chupacabra, Latin American folklore. The chupacabra is a creature in Latin American folklore believed to drain the blood of livestock, particularly goats. It is often depicted as a fearsome, blood-sucking monster. Yowie, Aboriginal mythology. The Yowie is Australia's version of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It is a humanoid cryptid said to inhabit the wilderness. While it is not necessarily associated with cannibalism, it shares similarities with the concept of a mysterious and elusive creature in the wilderness. Yeti, Himalayan folklore. The Yeti, or abominable snowman, is a legendary ape-like creature said to inhabit the Himalayan mountains. Like the Wendigo, it is often depicted as a mysterious and elusive figure in the wilderness. Wraiths and ghouls, Western horror lore. In Western horror lore, wraiths and ghouls are undead creatures known for their malevolence and association with death. They may share some thematic elements with the Wendigo, particularly in their eerie and predatory nature. These creatures and legends vary in their cultural contexts and specific attributes. They often serve as a cautionary tale or embodiments of fear and the unknown. Each culture's mythology and folklore contribute to the tales of supernatural beings and entities that continue to captivate our imaginations and explore the darker aspects of human existence. Now for our story. The Wendigo. The Wendigo is a story from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. It tells the story of a monster that originates from Native American legend. It's also a retelling of the Algernon Blackwood 1910 novella, The Wendigo. The story. A wealthy man wanted to go hunting in a part of northern Canada where few other people had ever hunted. He traveled to a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him, but no one would do it. It was too dangerous, they said. Finally, he found an Indian who needed money badly, and he agreed to take him. The Indian's name was Defago. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted, but they had nothing to show for it. The third night, a windstorm came up. They lay in their tent, listening to the wind howling and the trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent flap. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air stirring. and the trees were standing perfectly still. Yet he could hear the wind howling, and the more he listened, the more it sounded as if it were calling Defago's name. Defago, it called. Defago. I must be losing my mind, the hunter thought. But Defago had gotten out of his sleeping bag. He was huddled in a corner of the tent, his head buried in his arms. "What's this all about?" the hunter asked. "It's nothing," Defago said. But the wind continued to call him, and Defago became more tense and more restless. "Defago," it called. "Defago." Suddenly he jumped to his feet, and he began to run from the tent, but the hunter grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. "You can't leave me out here," the hunter shouted. And then the wind called again, and Defago broke loose and ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went. Again and again, he cried, "Oh, my fiery feet, my burning feet of fire." And then his voice faded away, and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Defago's tracks in the snow. They went through the woods down to the lake, and then out onto the ice. But soon he noticed something strange. The steps Defago had taken got longer and longer. They were so long, no human being could have taken them. It was as if something had helped him to hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out to the middle of the lake, but there they disappeared. At first he thought that Defago had fallen through the ice, but there wasn't any hole. Then he thought that something had pulled him off the ice into the sky, but that made no sense. As he stood wondering what had happened, the wind picked up again. Soon it was howling, as it had the night before, and then he heard Defago's voice. It was coming from up above, and again he heard Defago screaming, "My fiery feet, my burning feet." But there was nothing to be seen. Now the hunter wanted to leave that place as fast as he could. He went back to camp and packed. And then he left some food for Defago, and he started out. Weeks later, he reached civilization. The following year, he went back to hunt in that area again. He went to the same trading post to look for a guide. The people there could not explain what had happened to Defago that night, but they had not seen him since. "Maybe it was the Wendigo," one of them said, and he laughed. "It's supposed to come with the wind. It drags you along at great speed until your feet are burned away, and more of you than that. Then it just carries you into the sky and drops you. It's just a crazy story, but that's what some of the Indians say." A few days later, the hunter was at the trading post again. An Indian came in and sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him, and he wore his hat so that you couldn't see his face. The hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over and asked, "Are you Defago?" The Indian didn't answer. "Do you know anything about him?" No answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help. But he couldn't see his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. No answer. To get a look at him, he lifted the Indian's hat. Then he screamed. There was nothing under the hat but a pile of ashes. Hello, welcome to the new channel. So if you haven't seen me before, I do cold ASMR reading for history and a lot of Viking history, folk tales, fairy tales, all kinds of things on my other channel, and that is called Lily's Viking Adventure. And I just created this new channel to read ASMR style some of my favorite scary and spooky stories, since Halloween will be coming up soon. So if you like this sort of thing, please subscribe, check me out as I get this channel started, and we'll see how it goes. Anything helps. A like, a sub, a share, comment, all those help me with the algorithm and to get me going. So I'm going to get started here. What I've got today is multiple different scary stories that I found on Reddit that I thought were interesting, and that's what we'll get started with. I'll also be including some readings of some famous Edgar Allan Poe poetry in the future, and different older stories, maybe some H.P. Lovecraft. And I am definitely open to any suggestions that you guys might have for this new channel endeavor. So kick me down a like, stab the like in the neck. Anyways, we'll get started here. Alright. Moved west of the Cascades recently. We have been doing tons of yard work and cleaning out trash in the yard, digging out garden beds and repairing them, etc. Disturbing the yard may have done this. I don't know. Anyways, my spouse and I were sitting on the porch looking at the stars. There is almost no light pollution. The only light around is from an elderly neighbor about an acre away, which is always on. We were watching the stars and heard a distinct humming very, very close to us in the pitch black darkness. It was beautiful sounding and like luring almost. But immediately we turned tail into the house, due to being raised with the knowledge that if you ever hear or see something, no, you didn't. What could this be? It definitely sounded deep, like a very deep-voiced man. The only thing that exists the way that the humming came from is a cow pasture, and then a mountain. Does anyone know any folklore? It was unnerving. I know I sound crazy, but there were no humans other than us nearby. Edit for clarity. This hum was someone singing at us like a humming at the beginning of that Misty Mountains Lord of the Rings song. Next story. I'm a graveyard nerd. It's quiet there and with beautiful landscaping. A great place to take reflective walks. One day it was very hot and I wanted to sit down. The closest thing besides the ground was a crypt that sat alone in the fork of one of the paths. I very respectfully said, "Please, may I sit here and rest a while?" as I climbed on top. Almost immediately I felt 2 knocks underneath me. I told myself it's my imagination. 2 more knocks. I say out loud, I mean you no disrespect. Knock twice more if you just want me to leave. It hesitated, then 2 distinct hard knocks hit me right in the bum where I sat. I said, okay, I'm going, LOL. Another time I went near dark. I've walked through the children's section many, many times. I've seen the toys people have placed on the children's graves. Some of them look 50+ years old. This night I didn't just walk past them. I stopped and thanked them all for coming here and trying to fulfill their destiny in some way, and told them I'm sorry it was cut short. As soon as I said rest in peace, one of those old, decrepit toys began to flash little lights and play music. So I noped all the way to the car. I actually stayed and tried to talk, but nothing else happened. Last one. I went to a different graveyard this time, in an old Moravian graveyard with graves as far back as the 1500s. Maybe earlier, but I couldn't read them all. This graveyard has huge hills with mausoleums tucked into the hills. I like to sit on top of one and look out over the whole place. Very serene. This day I sat up and watched a fox spinning circles way down at the bottom of the hill. He acted confused, like he had rabies. I wasn't going to move until he left, so I waited. A woman came, and I didn't even know where because I could see the whole place. She walked towards a grave near where this fox was spinning around. I got worried for her and stood up to scream down to her that there was a rabid fox and to run away. But when I stood up, she wasn't there anymore. I waited for the fox to show itself again, but it was gone too, just like that, gone. I very cautiously climbed down, went down the hill to where I saw all this happen. No woman, no fox, nothing but quiet graves and beautiful flowers. Next story. I grew up in a small town in Australia. My twin brother and I would frequently ride our bikes around the neighborhood when we were growing up, around the late 2000s, early 2010s. There was this one house that we'd pass that would always leave us at unease. A weird and deranged-looking man would sit on the camping chair and drink on the side of the road outside of his house, in which all the grass in the surrounding his yard was extremely overgrown and unkempt. We thought nothing of it, however. We always felt the same sense of dread whenever we'd ride past. Several years later, around 2017, there was a news article that 2 men had gotten into a fight, resulting in the other being stabbed to death. The mugshot that came up on the news showed the man we had always found creepy. It happened in that same household that we'd frequently ride past, around a block or 2 away from mine. It might not seem like much, but it has always made my skin crawl, knowing that I came face to face with that deranged psychopath on multiple occasions, and that I lived only a walk away. I still live there, and I've heard nothing more of it. I hope he is locked up for life. Next story. Years ago, I used to do yard work for an aunt while I was pregnant and in between jobs. At the time, she was helping an older couple in their 50s out that was down on their luck, William and Jenny. They were staying in my aunt's house, trying to get back on their feet, and William also did repairs around the house in exchange for their room there. One day I was out in the yard and I noticed William outside staring at the road. He was a very quiet guy. Kind, but didn't have much to say usually. He looked very troubled for some reason, so I asked him if he was all right. "Yes, well, I guess," he replied. I've always tried to be empathic to others, regardless of me knowing them very well. I told him if anything was bothering him, or if he just needed to talk about or vent, if it was something I could help with, I was happy to just listen. "Well," he replied. He pulled a cigarette out of his pocket, snapped his Zippo lighter open, and took a long drag of a cigarette. I didn't really notice he smoked before this day. He started telling me about where he and Jenny had been staying before they were living at my aunt's house. They had a very broken-down small RV, but still could run, and they'd drive it different places and park for the night. One night, they parked in a dark and shabby part of town, up in the city, about 30 minutes away from where my aunt's house was. It was a run-down area next to some old train tracks. It was after dark, not sure what time at night, but he did mention it was after dark and late. William told me the second they parked there, he just was hit with a horrible sense of anxiety, doom, fear. He couldn't describe it precisely. William was not a believer in the paranormal at this time, but he said he absolutely sensed something, and he said it didn't feel like a human presence. It just felt like evil was sharing space with us. William and Jenny had a small dog. Jenny was going to take the dog out to use the bathroom, and Jenny didn't seem to feel what William was initially feeling. Jenny got the dog and went outside. William was standing alone in the RV when the RV door swung right open on its own. He said he called for Jenny. She didn't answer. All of a sudden, he felt an ice-cold chill, and he heard something almost like heavy breathing and low-toned sorrowing. He just heard it, didn't see anything. Then all of a sudden he could feel heavy footsteps running right towards him, and then he felt something go through him. He said his entire body went ice cold. The smell of sulfur was in the air, and he felt paralyzed for a few moments. He fell and got back up and flew out of the RV. He couldn't find Jenny and was screaming for her. She suddenly appeared, seemingly out of breath. The dog had ran off as soon as she took him out. The dog was shaking and seemed to be terrified by something, and neither one of them ever saw the dog look that way. They got their things and immediately left that area. William told me that it felt demonic. Whatever that was wanted him and wanted to do him harm. It took months to tell Jenny what happened in that RV while she was outside with the dog. William was shaking, telling his story, the quiet guy that he was and how scared he looked talking about it. I absolutely believe that all happened. He said occasionally after that he'd have flashbacks of the presence going through his body and the ice-cold chill that enveloped his body. The feelings of pure fear and paralysis. Feeling whatever that was wasn't human and wanted to harm him. Never, ever felt anything like that, he said under his breath. He lit another cigarette. This happened 10 years ago. Sorry if some of this is hard to read. I'm definitely not a professional storyteller. But listening to him describe this has been something that's never left my mind. And I've always wondered what was really out there by those rundown train tracks. Next story. This is a story my mother told me this few months ago. It was about my grandparents who were at a party. Also attending the party was a murderer who has killed around 5 people in the span of his life. Anyway, at some point, beer ran out at the party, and they wanted to get new beer. The murderer asked my grandmother if he wanted to grab some beer with her. The murderer was known for always carrying around an axe, killing women. He also went to some of the same classes as my grandpa. My grandma first said sure and went to ask my grandpa for allowance if she can go with him. My grandpa first said sure and they wanted to go grab beer. But in the last few instances before leaving the party, my grandma told him that she changed her mind and didn't want to go anymore. While they were on the party, he was not on his last victim. In the meaning of he wasn't killed all the victims he had to this date. When I brought this up to my grandma, she said that she had a super weird feeling about him and felt unsafe in his presence. English isn't my native language, so sorry for some poor phrasing. This story took place in Europe, and I think 1975 or something around that. Okay, next story. These stories are all real accounts of things that have happened to me and my family. Reading the posts on here, I started to remember these, so I apologize for the weird order it's written in. I was 20, female, vacuuming my grandma's hallway one day. I was right in front of the yellow room that my uncle would eventually pass from a heart attack in when I felt a tap on my shoulder, felt someone blow through my hair, and saw my hair fly forward into my face. My gram was the only other person home in the kitchen besides me at the time. She was wheelchair bound and was a non-practical joking Christian who would never try to scare me. Before they moved in, 3 or more years before the above incident, I was helping my family paint some of the house. I took a break to read a book in that yellow room. I laid on the floor with my head facing the door, which was open. I heard my dad go out to the car or garage, so I'm definitely alone in the house. And a few moments after he leaves, the door to the yellow room abruptly slammed shut. And I looked up from my book to see a red-headed woman hanging in the closet to the right of the door. 6 years after this incident, my uncle had a heart attack and was found lying with his eyes wide open in front of that closet. 4 years later, my grandmother passed in the room beside the yellow room. At one point, before my uncle passed, my gram asked me if I ever felt the need to call upon the name of Jesus in her house. I am not religious, but I took that to mean, have you ever felt unsafe and afraid here? And I told her what I had seen in the closet before they moved in. All the color left her face, and her eyes were so wide it looked like they could have fallen from the sockets. In a hushed voice, as if she was afraid someone would hear her, she told me, "The red-headed woman runs naked through my room, screaming when I try to sleep." She had me pray with her, and we didn't mention it again after that. As her health began to decline, my sister and her kids moved in. The kids were offered the yellow room and had no idea what I saw, or that their great uncle died in that room. But they both declined and were terrified of going down that hallway. My sister stayed in that room for a while, and I believe she was at the height of her chronic depression. My nephew is now a preteen and finally worked up the courage to move into that room. He keeps odd hours, and the door still closes by itself, but according to him, it never slams shut. My niece was terrorized by a pale, black-haired woman in the hallway bathroom. She's the one person in the house that I've heard talk about a woman with black hair there, and it's been a few years since she mentioned seeing her. The air vent is near that yellow room, and I tried to reason with myself that the AC came back on, and that's why my hair flew in my face. But I checked the thermostat, and the air conditioner wasn't running. The fan wasn't even on. Contextually, I don't remember when this happened, but I was hanging out with my aunt in her room down the same hallway, but the opposite end. We were just chatting about random stuff when her low-placed ponytail was flung forward over her head and slapped her in the face. I saw it fly up. She didn't make a head-banging gesture to cause it to fly forward. It was like someone went behind her and slapped the underside of her ponytail. Surprisingly, we never had the house cleaned for spirits. My gram was devout, but by that time they moved to the VA. She would watch church services on TV and didn't belong to a church community here to get that kind of help. The 4th of July, after my uncle passed, I was using the restroom near the dining room, opposite end of the house from the bedrooms and hallway. and everyone else was outside, either at the grill or doing firework inventory. I distinctly heard the disembodied voice of said late uncle call my name. He had a very distinct voice, deep and disquieting. I was afraid of him when he was alive. He was an addict and had erratic and often violent outbursts. Recently, my mom told me that he would write me letters when they still lived in New York. I could not read or write yet, and he eventually started sending creepy letters, asking me why I never wrote him back, or why didn't I want to play with him, that it hurt his feelings, made him upset and so angry. I am so glad she didn't tell me about this until after he died, but it still scared the living hell out of me. Sent this to my niece, and she said that when they talk about what they have seen in the house, the lights flicker. She also said she had a dream that our Gram came back, but she looked different. My Gram used to color her hair red. Next story. This one is about Elisa Lam. If you haven't heard of her, it's a really very interesting set of circumstances that led to her disappearance. And then when she was found, it just made it even more strange. But I am sure that most of you probably have heard of Elisa Lam. It's kind of a bigger story. So here we go. The unsettling story of Elisa Lam is one that continues to baffle and horrify. In 2013, the 21-year-old Canadian student was staying at the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, a place with a dark history of suicides, murders, and infamous residents, including serial killers. Lam was on a solo trip, keeping a blog about her adventures, but after a few days in LA, she suddenly vanished. The mysterious elevator footage. And if you haven't seen this footage, definitely recommend checking that out. It is very creepy. Like, what was going on with this girl? The most chilling clue in her disappearance is a 4-minute surveillance video from the hotel's elevator. In the footage, Elisa is seen behaving strangely, pressing multiple elevator buttons, stepping in and out of the elevator, hiding in the corner, and appearing to talk to someone unseen. At one point, she steps out of the elevator. The doors close without moving. The video, released by the LAPD to help find Elisa, quickly went viral, sparking endless theories and speculation. Was she playing a game, as some suggested? Or was she fleeing from someone? Others believed she might have been experiencing a psychotic episode. The footage is eerie, with the inexplicable behavior leaving more questions than answers. The grim discovery. 2 weeks after the video was released, guests at the Cecil began complaining about low water pressure, strange tasting water, and discolored tap water. Maintenance workers were sent to check the hotel's water tanks on the roof, and there they made a horrifying discovery. Elisa Lam's body floating lifelessly in one of the tanks. Her death was ruled as accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder listed as a significant factor. The coroner's report noted no signs of trauma or foul play, and toxicology tests were inconclusive due to the body's decomposition. But how Elisa ended up in the tank remains a mystery. The hotel's roof was locked, and the tanks were difficult to access. To this day, no one knows how she got there. Theories and speculations. The case has sparked numerous theories ranging from the supernatural to the criminal. Some believe she was murdered and her death staged as an accident, while others suggest she was playing a dangerous game inspired by urban legends. A popular theory involves the elevator game, a ritual that supposedly allows players to enter another dimension by pressing a sequence of buttons in an elevator. Others have connected her death to the hotel's dark history, suggesting that the spirits of past victims might have influenced her behavior. The Cecil Hotel, now rebranded as Stay on Main, has been linked to numerous tragedies over the years, leading some to believe it is cursed. Cultural impact. Elisa Lam's story has been and become a modern urban legend, inspiring countless internet sleuths, documentaries, and even a season of the TV show American Horror Story. Her case also serves as a reminder of the dangers of untreated mental illness and the tragic consequences it can have. Despite the official ruling of accidental death, the strange circumstances surrounding Elisa Lam's demise continue to haunt and fascinate. The unanswered questions, eerie footage, and the grim setting of the Cecil Hotel ensure that her story remains one of the most unsettling mysteries of our time. And I'm going to stop there. I hope you enjoyed this first show of the new channel. If you are new to my channel, go check out Lilly's Viking Adventures. If you like ASMR for sleep, I have probably 150 videos there. It's probably over 1,000 hours of read time, so go check that out, sub over there. And welcome to the new show. Thank you. Hello. Welcome back to Lilly's Macabre Adventures. I have a really good one for you today. It's absolutely disgusting. I think you'll love it. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And if you enjoy this, stab the like button. This is called The Arm Ouroboros by Adam Troy Castro. I take the hammer in my right hand and I raise it up over my head to bring down, screaming, against the left hand I have placed flat on the tabletop. My knuckles do not break. My skin does not tear. I do not scream in agony. Instead, my left hand flattens like soft rubber, the imprint of the hammer's head clearly visible in what is supposed to be human flesh. The sight is worse than any pain could possibly be. I hammer my hand again, and again after that, developing a rhythm, watching as the skin deforms, the boneless flesh spreads out, and the appendage I have always known becomes a flat sack, wider by many measures than it's always been, a squashed sack of a thing that conforms to both the surface of the table and to the shape of the hammer as demanded of it. I lift my arm and let the limp thing at the end of my wrist dangle, and it does not hurt. Still, it does not bleed. I put the hammer down and examine the rubbery mat that I have made of my hand, and I shake it, wincing at the smacking sound it makes as it flaps. It is not my hand, not really, but I have had this feeling for some days now. The revulsion for this thing that looked like my hand and felt like my hand, but yet was not my hand, was instead a stranger at the end of my wrist. A thing that had no business being there, and which I want gone. I do not know how it happened or when it happened. I am pretty sure that my right hand, the one that wielded the hammer, is still real. But after the results I have just experienced, I need to be sure. And so I cross the kitchen to my knife rack, where I have multiple blades that I've kept sharp enough for the efficient carving of meat. I use my right hand to pull out the most serrated, and I regard it with distinct unhappiness, realizing for the first time how difficult this next part of the experiment will be, when I no longer have a left hand to manipulate it with, but I still have options. And so I tuck the handle of the blade under my left armpit, closing my right fist around the serrated edge. My palm protests at the sharpness. I suspect that my right hand will respond properly to being cut. Under normal circumstances, this would be a stupid experiment. But parts of me are no longer flesh, but are rather something else, and I have to know for sure. I tighten my fist and then rip my hand as fast as I can. What I feel is what I should feel: agony. What I see pour from my right hand is what should pour from it: blood. And when I open that hand to assess the damage, I find what I should find: a deep slash with whitening edges and a pulsing stream of scarlet that already paints the entire surface and shows no sign of relenting. I know what I've done is stupid, but it is also comforting. My right hand is a hand, if a mangled one. My left is something else, and it is infinitely more disturbing to me that it does not hurt than that my right hand does. I feel faint. I know that I should not have done what I just did. I do not understand the madness that made me. I should get on the phone, somehow, call an ambulance, somehow, get these problems dealt with. Somehow. But I live in fear of what I will find out if I do manage to stagger into an emergency room and somebody is able to tell me exactly what has become of my left hand. So I stagger to my living room couch and lower myself onto its cushions, and for a minute or so I sit there and bleed, content to do that, unbothered by the blood that is now dribbling down my arm and staining my chest, and the very place where I sit. My right hand is hurting less now, and I suppose that I'm going into shock, and I find that I approve of this development because it deletes much unneeded distraction from the real problem. I looked down at my left hand. It is still largely flat, though it has plumped some, taking on a gray coloring that I suppose I should see as ominous. I lift it, and the silly putty fingers flop like bungee cords. The palm has also developed a horizontal wound to match the one on the right, except that it would possess none of the character of a wound, not any pain, and not any blood. It is distressingly smooth. For all my life, that palm has had what palms should have, a pattern of skin creases in the shape of the letter N, but I have succeeded in smoothing those out. What I am seeing looks like plastic, as cold to the eye as it has been to the touch. I wonder if it's even alive, and I also wonder just how far up my arm the false flesh goes. If the same flattening would occur if I used the hammer on my wrist or my elbow or my shoulder. Maybe the one hand that's bleeding so profusely is the only part of my body that has not been quietly transformed into whatever the left hand has become. And maybe later, if I'm up to it, I will have to perform similar experiments on other body parts, like my feet or my face. But somehow I think not. Somehow I think I've been lucky enough to catch this early, while only my left hand is affected. And if I hadn't been on top of things, I might have ended up in real trouble. In the meantime, the left hand is still plumping. Maybe it possesses the ability to reinflate itself. If not with the blood it doesn't have, then with air, the way a squeaky toy does when released by a dog's jaw. Maybe it's actually an improvement on the hand I lost when it decided to take over, and maybe this will be convenient if the hand I've sliced is in some way irreparably damaged by the slicing of tendons or whatnot. It might not be a bad thing to have a left hand that can reinflate itself after being hammered flat. But I rebel at that premise because it is still not my hand. I am still disturbed by its presence at the end of that wrist. I still want it gone. And so I need to explore this problem further before I do something idiotic like pass out. I extend my right index finger. It is sticky with blood, and as I peer at it closely, a discreet drop of that blood dangles from the tip, gathering enough substance to drop. The dangling droplet is bright red, and it shines with a little window pattern from the kitchen lights. It fascinates me, and for a moment I wait for the droplet to fall, but it appears unwilling to, and so I touch it to my tongue, tasting its sharp tang. I suck the blood off just to dry that finger a little bit. I pull it from between my pursed lips and close the rest of my fingers into as tight a fist as I can, leaving the index to probe with. And then I press it to the swelling flesh of my left hand. My right fingers feel the touch. The flesh of my suspect left hand does not. It feels numbed, as if by Novocaine, alien the same way the side of my face felt when I had to have wisdom tooth removed and the dentist made that whole side of my face as rubbery as a floor mat. My cheek had not felt like part of me. Whatever I'm touching now does not feel like part of me either. The skin depresses when I press harder, but I can only tell this because I am looking at it directly and not because I have any sense of it except from what I get from the probing finger. I shift to another spot, leaving a little blood mark, and try again, moving to the unnaturally smooth palm. One of the long flattened digits flops against the uninjured index, and it is exactly like being touched by a foreign object. I probe the wound that is not a wound. It closes on my finger. Its grip is tight. I cannot pull the finger free. My right finger is now embedded in my numb and rubbery left palm. I yank harder, and this time feel resistance, a responding tug that represents my index finger being pulled further in. By the time I am even aware of it, the entire finger has been swallowed, and the substance of the left hand is now flush with the ravaged disaster that is my right. I yell, and I get to my feet, and at this point discover what all people who have lost the use of limbs must discover. But I rely on them more than I ever would have guessed just to steady myself. Already dizzy, I find myself overcorrecting and about to fall over. To avoid a potentially disastrous plunge, I respond to the instinct and let my knees go limp to take some of the impact. I kneel and then topple face first. I feel something break in my nose. I taste blood in the back of my throat. I roll over and face the ceiling, white and dusty. A previously unspotted strand of cobweb joining one rafter and one wall. I manage to raise my joined arms and see that the flattened left hand has proceeded further in its ambition to take in the bleeding right, that it has swallowed that limb past the wrist and is halfway to the elbow. The rubbery skin flexes like a python swallowing a cat, and my right arm sinks further into my suddenly carnivorous left. There is no possibility of getting to a hospital now, because both my arms are useless, except for those roles that their new paradigm has cast them in, as something that eats and something that is eaten. The flattened fingers of my left hand twitch and start to writhe like subsidiary snakes. They grope like blind things, grab hold higher up my right arm and start to constrict. Pressure's unbelievable. I understand that for my left hand to swallow more, the right must be reduced in size, something that can only be done by breaking the bones and making them parts that can go down. I feel a violent lurch and feel the sting of blood in my eyes before I blink away the sting and see the white spear of bone protruding from the meat of my forearm. I try to scream, and I suppose that what comes from my mouth qualifies as a scream, but it is not very loud. It is more a bubbling retch than anything else, and there is no possibility of anyone hearing me in the next apartment, or the one above, or the one below. And meanwhile, the gray flesh of my left hand closes over the protruding bone and compresses, grinding the splinters together while moving on to the elbow and beyond. My arms now resemble a letter O, one that becomes more and more flattened as the left one continues to elongate and the right one continues to disappear. I can only wonder what will happen when the left swallows its opposing limb all the way up to my shoulder. Will it be satisfied with that? Or will it go full Ouroboros, that one part of my body becoming the mouth that will continue to eat until it finally catches up from behind? I know only that some of the things breaking inside me are not at all close to the site of the battle. The blood trying to flow into the besieged arm is now backing up, and I can feel my blood pounding in my ears, bursting like a balloon in my chest, becoming a red curtain over my vision. Already my heart labors to pump. I know that I will be dead soon. I do not know whether my left hand will be, or if it can survive this better than I can, whether it still be hungry, or what it will elect to eat.